Alright, 3M, welcome to your last and final unit of Term 3 in 2012. And of course we saved the best for last. This unit we're going to be talking about the variety of life. And actually the content for this unit is coming from a Form 4 textbook, an IGCSE textbook for Form 4s, and so you guys are going to get a little taste of what some subject material will be like in Form 4. And so I say we save the best for last because the variety of life incorporates many different things into one. So of course it's a biology topic. We're talking about different species, the variety of different living organisms. But within that, we're going to be talking about evolution, we're going to be talking about chemistry, we're going to be talking about the different ways to characterize and observe and do experiments. So it brings in all the different types of science that we've been working on into one unit. And of course it's a biology unit, so it's the best kind of unit. And so before we get too deep into the variety of life, we need to cover some basics, right? So the fundamentals of this unit are understanding the differences between living and non-living things. So obviously, maybe this seems obvious to most of you guys. It's maybe we can always tell just by looking if something's living or not living. If we see a person walking across the street, we obviously can tell, since that person is moving, they're using energy, that they must be a living thing. Versus if there's just a rock laying on the ground, the rock isn't breathing, the rock isn't using energy, things like that. So those are the more obvious ones. But sometimes it's not as easy to tell, and we'll investigate some situations when it's not quite as easy to tell. And so to help us tell the difference, there's 7 characteristics that all living things have that we can use to differentiate between things that are living and non-living. So here at the bottom of the page we have some of the more basic examples. Obviously animals and plants and other things that grow and move around, like bacteria and fungus, are going to be all living things. And then non-living things that are not moving or not using energy, things like that, are going to be things like water, rocks, soil. So I think you guys have a pretty good idea about that. But let's break it down into our 7 characteristics. So number 1 is eating, feeding, nutrition. We make this one number 1 because the rest of the steps couldn't happen without number 1. All organisms need to take in substances from their surroundings, and that's just there's no exceptions to that rule. The 2 pictures we have down here are obviously a human eating food, and then on the right we have a plant taking up all the nutrients that it needs to survive. And so think back to some of our previous units, and what do humans, plants, what do living things use these substances for? So take a minute to think about that. Yeah, so if we remember, the plants use various elements to promote growth and build their DNA and have the right colored leaves and have strong roots. Humans, obviously, we need it for energy. We need it to build strong bones like calcium. We need vitamin D to build strong bones. We also need calcium for muscles, proteins for muscles, so on and so forth. So lots of different things that we need food for. That's why it's number 1. Number 2, respiration. So after we eat the food, we take that food, we break it down, and we can make energy from the food. And that's all respiration is. Living things breaking down food to release energy. And respiration gets to be number 2 on the list because this energy that we get out from breaking down our food allows us to do numbers 3 through 7. So now let's see what we can do with this energy now that we've done respiration. So number 3 is move, right? It's the one that we always think of when we think about living things. Obviously, an example that comes to mind would be a person walking or running, like we have in the picture on the left. But movement isn't always an obvious thing in living things. For instance, plants are rooted to the ground, right? So you don't see your oak tree walking across the street in the morning because it's got roots in the ground. But that doesn't mean that things aren't moving inside of plants, right? So inside of cells, there's constantly things getting transported, shuttled around inside your cells. So on this picture on the right, don't worry about the details. It's just an example of a type of cellular movement. So here the purple circle in the middle is called a proton pump. It allows protons to get literally pumped around inside of plants, inside of animals as well. So that's just an example of how things can move and not be walking around. They can actually be moving inside of our cells. All right, what's number 4? What do you guys think? So number 4 is excretion. So we do our respiration, we get lots of energy, which is always good, but sometimes the chemical reactions that give us energy produce products that are toxic or harmful or things that we just don't want around in our bodies. And so we need a way to get rid of them, right? So different living things do excretion differently. Fish, since they don't need to worry about conserving water, they just excrete pure ammonia, and ammonia is the thing that is toxic that we have to try to get rid of. So they can just get rid of it straight because they don't have to worry about conserving water. Birds, on the other hand, they don't live in water, so they do have to worry about conserving how much water they use. So they concentrate the ammonia down into uric acid, which allows them to keep more water inside of their bodies. And then mammals like humans, or other examples are amphibians or sharks. They get rid of their ammonia in a compound called urea, which is how humans get rid of their ammonia as well. So number 4 is excretion, and see if you guys can remember all 7, because we're gonna have a quiz at the end. So number 5 is growth. All living things, even if they're only one cell, they all grow. So we have bacteria that are only one cell big, but the cell still grows. The cell still produces its proteins. The cell still makes new substances. And obviously then if we have things that are multicellular organisms like humans or plants, it's a lot easier to see that growth. We can see the organism literally get bigger and bigger, as in this picture down here, or as a baby goes from a baby to a toddler to a adolescent, and so on and so forth. All right, so number 5 is grow. Can anyone guess what the last 2 are? What we have left? So number 6 is reproduction. All living organisms have to be able to make new organisms like themselves, or species would just die out, right? If there was no way to reproduce and make new organisms, to make new individuals, pretty soon the species would have no way to continue, right? So every single living organism has to have a way to reproduce, to make new organisms. And the final one, and it's not necessarily an easy one, but if you've already guessed it, then you can give yourself a pat on the back. Number 7 is senses. So even though when we think of senses, we think of our 5 senses that we have, and we have different sensory organs. And so granted, not all living things have 5 senses like we do, but all living things are able to detect or sense changes in their environments and surroundings and respond to them. So one obviously very common environmental stimulus or environmental signal is sunlight, right? So sunlight for humans, obviously we sense it with our eyes, our sense of touch, when it gets hot, so on and so forth. Sunlight helps us regulate our sleep cycles and things like that, so that's how our bodies respond to it. Some plants grow towards sunlight in a process called phototaxis, and so this is another example of how plants, even though they don't have eyes or ears or noses, they can still sense where the sunlight is, and they actually grow in the direction of the sun. Another quick example of something that plants and or all living things can detect is changes in temperature, right? So the picture on the right obviously shows a tree that's been frozen in wintertime. That's what it looks like where I come from back in the U.S., if you guys are wondering, in the winter. And so plants, when winter comes around, plants just stop. Plants just kind of calm down. They stop doing most of their chemical reactions and just wait around until it's warmer again outside, and just kind of let the freezing pass by. So that's how plants can sense and respond to cold temperatures. Alright, so now that we've gone through all 7, I'd like to just quickly point out a couple things that are not quite as easy to identify as living or non-living. So usually things are pretty easy, like humans versus rocks, but one example that actually has given scientists a lot of trouble are viruses. So viruses like when you get a cold and you get a runny nose, that's usually caused by a virus, or human immunodeficiency virus is HIV. So there's different viruses that our bodies can get, and the actual virus itself is hard to tell if it's living or non-living. So let's go back through our characteristics and see if we can figure out if a virus is living or not. So nutrition and feeding. So all living organisms need substances from their surroundings. And so we can make an argument that viruses do feed, because viruses can't live without host cells and the proteins and structures of host cells. So we could maybe argue that viruses use the nutrients or the substances from their host cells as a type of nutrition, but it's a little bit of a stretch. But we can still maybe call it a living thing. Breaking down food to release energy. This one's also tough because viruses don't technically have cells. They kind of hijack our own cells. But if we consider the hijacked cells as the virus's cells, then maybe, yeah, they can release energy. Move around, yeah, the viruses move throughout our bloodstream when we get a cold, things like that. Excretion, yeah, this is where we start to lose the virus a little bit. The virus itself doesn't necessarily have to worry about excretion so much, because it's just catching a ride on some other cells as it goes around. Growth, the viruses definitely grow. This is one thing that they do very well, and why it's been tricky to classify them, because once they hijack a cell, they multiply and then burst through the cell and then go on and infect other cells, and reproduce. They definitely reproduce. They use your own cells, machinery, to actually make copies of themselves and then go on and infect other cells again. And senses, you could argue that they have senses, because there's viruses that are able to infect certain types of cells, so they must be able to sense which type of cell they're binding to and things like that. So viruses, we would probably classify them as non-living, but you can see how it can be tricky to classify things sometimes. All right, so you guys ready for your quiz? We've gone through all 7 twice now. So let's see if we pop up a blank screen. Do you think you could put down numbers 1 through 7? So think about it for a minute. Maybe pause the video and see if you can write down numbers 1 through 7 in your notes without cheating. But if it's too hard, so pause the video now if you want to try it. But if it's too hard, here's some hints that we can go through. So remember, number 1 and number 2 allow the rest of the characteristics to happen. So without number 1 and number 2, numbers 3 through 7 wouldn't happen. Number 3 is the one that is not quite as obvious in plants, because plants are rooted in the ground. So that's your hint for number 3. Number 4, what do we do when we make waste in our bodies? And number 5 and 6 are related to each other, and they also are what allow species to continue on or be carried on. Number 7 is a little bit more goofy or obscure of a clue, but the clue is I see dead people. So if you can think about what that quote might be talking about, that's your hint for number 7. All right, so let's quickly go back, run through. If you wanna pause the video again on your quiz and try it again, really quickly pause the video now. Otherwise, we're gonna go back through the 7. So number 1 was nutrition and feeding. Number 2 was respiration, to get energy out. Number 3 was movement, people running around. Number 4, excretion. We make waste in our chemical reactions. We got to get rid of it somehow. Humans get rid of it through urea. Growth. All living things grow. Even single-celled organisms. All living things grow. Number 6, reproduction. We got to keep our species staying strong and continuing on. And number 7 was senses. All right, so we should all have those 7 steps memorized now. Those are going to pop up again on your end of your test. Make sure you got them all. Make sure you got it down in your notes. You got it memorized in your head as well. And thanks you guys for tuning in, and next time we'll start talking about how to name individuals based on their characteristics, dichotomous key. Thanks guys, see you next time.